Welcome to Eagles Postgame Show presented by Ricoh. I'm Marisa Pilla alongside Fran Duffy and Ike Reese. And the Philadelphia Eagles regular season is in the books. It was a regular season that started off 10-1. It will end 11-5. A very disappointing, unforeseen loss again for the Philadelphia Eagles, this time at the hands of the New York Giants. What do we even begin to make of this?
Well, I look at today's game and I say to myself, I understand that ultimately in the end, the results wouldn't have mattered because the Cowboys, they beat the Washington Commanders. But the way this game started out, the way the first half of this game played out when the Washington game with Dallas was still in doubt, I was disappointed in the way that the team came out and played today. You know, the fact that they just didn't seem as if they were into this game and had the intensity that was required to win this game for what was at stake and what was on the line. And, you know, it's one thing to say, you know, you're playing for the number 2 seed and you're trying to get a couple home games and possibly win the NFC East. And that's obviously a carrot that the Eagles were trying to get. But I think ultimately this game was more about how you finish the season out, how you get yourself prepared going into the playoffs. Hopefully you're making a deep run. And to not have the players come out and perform the way they had seemingly talked about they were eager to go out and do, and the things they vocalized throughout the season made you believe that mentally they were right where you needed them to be going into this game. To see the results out there on the field, you know, that was just, it was disappointing and disheartening to see that today.
It took two of the words I was going to use right out of my mouth. I mean, disappointing, disheartening, whatever word you want to use to describe what you saw. I mean, you're exactly right. The outcome of the game does not really matter, right? Because the Cowboys won today against Washington. So what the Eagles did in this game did not matter. What you wanted to see was this team come out better than 24-0 at halftime, because this was not last week against Arizona, which was it was a crushing loss against the Cardinals, coming into your house and beating you the way that they did in the home finale of the regular season. But in that game, you know what? The offense played really well. They scored points on 4 out of 6 drives. They just didn't have the ball enough. In this game, the offense came out flat. The defense responding to what happened last week to come out the way that they did to start this game. And obviously they turned things around in the second half. But I think when you look at the way that this game started, with everything that was on the line potentially for the Eagles, this is going to be a tough one to swallow, and we feel like we've been saying that the Eagles have been taking that medicine over the last month.
Yeah, I'm a first-time mom, and it's the first time I get to say this. I'm not mad, I'm disappointed.
Congrats.
And that's just how I feel right now, because everything chalked up to the end of the season of looking at these final 2 games against the Cardinals, against the Giants, one of those being at home and one of those being just right up the road. It was the easiest remaining schedule for any playoff team, especially considering who San Francisco had to play, who Dallas had to play. Easiest remaining schedule. And it just felt like something was continually missing. What was more disappointing to you, last week or this week?
Well, last week for sure. I mean, I thought last week almost took the soul out of the city, out of the team, because it was such a disappointing loss considering what was at stake, what happened Saturday night in Dallas versus Detroit, the opportunity to win out, and the Eagles would have the number 2 seed and at least be able to have the potential of having 2 home games before you could be in the NFC Championship game. So last week was certainly a more gut-punching sort of defeat. Today was more or less you wanted to see what you had left in you. And so this is where the team has to sort of look themselves in the mirror and figure out, what are they as a team? Who are they as a team? There's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of lip service. And I think the heart and the mind is in the right place, but there's something missing. There's something missing. I've been on the other side of this thing. I've been in that locker room. I know what it's like to have enough talent there to get things accomplished, to potentially overachieve. And I also know what it's like to underachieve. And this seems like a team that hasn't necessarily played up to its potential all year long. And the season's running out. We've been talking about this for about a month and a half.
Yep.
When you talk about disappointing losses and the team trying to search for an identity and figure out who they are. Well, there's not much time left in the season to figure that out. And today, again, the result doesn't matter as much as how we came out and how we played at the beginning of this game.
Once you got that X next to your name in the standings, right, and you earned that playoff berth, as the Eagles were going through this losing streak, it became, hey, you know what? You've got X amount of games, 4 games left, 5 games left, 3 games left, 2 games left, now 1 game left to get things corrected, get that momentum going in the right direction before you get to the postseason. Well, it's all zeros on the clock now. The Eagles have 1 week. They're going to play the Tampa Bay Bucks next week. We'll find out exactly date and time in the next couple of hours. But the Eagles have got to do some soul searching this week, and we're going to hear it this week. That, you know what, everybody's record is now 0-0. You get into the postseason. All of that is true. Everything that the Eagles want is still out there in front of them. Can they turn it around? That remains to be seen. But those are going to be the discussions that not just like every player is going to have with each other, the players and coaches, but each of these guys are going to have these talks with themselves, right? You have to be able to look inside and say, what do I need to do to try and turn this around?
And when you look at the roster, right, the thing that becomes a little more frustrating and a little more mind confusing is that it's not about a talent issue. Like you realize there's enough talent here that they are a more talented team than the New York Giants. They're a more talented team than the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
Like we know that. Than the Seattle Seahawks, right? Like so. It's not about whether or not you have the talent here to go out and win these games. It's about performing and living up to that potential that you have in each individual player. And there has to be a connectivity here amongst the players, amongst the team, the staff, the coaches, and everything else that allows you to perform at your best. And that's the thing where I look at when I see the Eagles right now, I'm saying to myself, man, there seems to be somewhat of a disconnect there that they have to find a way to get connected by next week. Because, again, it's not a talent issue. And that's the frustrating part, is that when you look at this roster, you look at this team, you're saying to yourself, you can accept if you figure you're a player or two away from being that good of a team. This is a team that was just in the Super Bowl last year. They were just 10-1 6 weeks ago. Like, something has happened with the team. And only they know, right? We can surmise on the outside and speculate what you want to on the outside, but only in the inside can you get these things figured out. And I feel like the messaging seems to be correct every week, but it doesn't show up on the field. And that's where it leaves you to wonder, how do you get this fixed? Where is the issue at? And then how can we bring this all together so that we can be the team that we expect to be?
You need to back up what you're talking about with what you're actually showing. And Ike, you said just a few moments ago that you were part of teams that maybe underachieved and you had the talent but couldn't reach the potential. Did those teams turn it around, and how did they? How do you galvanize a team that's underperforming?
All right, so when we're talking about turning around, it's relative, right? Sure. So, they're a team, like I think about the 03 team. I think about the team we had in the 03 team that coming into the season, there were high expectations. But then there were a lot of injuries that besieged the team or what have you. So that was a team I kind of thought that we overachieved as a team eventually to where we got to the NFC Championship game. And although we lost to the Carolina Panthers, I didn't think that team was as talented as some of our other teams. But when you look at our 02 team that we lost to Tampa in the NFC Championship game, that's a team that I thought that was talented enough that we should have been in the Super Bowl and have won the Super Bowl that year. I know we lost Donovan late in that year, but we got him back. And I still think that's how good we were, that we lost our quarterback for 6 weeks and still ended up with the number 1 seed in the NFC. That just goes to show you how talented we were overall. But in the end, we didn't live up to those expectations and beat Tampa in the NFC Championship game. And I thought that was our best chance to go out and win a Super Bowl. That was probably our most talented team overall.
So, I'm sorry, when in 03, in the team that overperformed, what was the centralizing thought that kept you all together that maybe something similar that the Eagles right now can emulate?
The thing that was different with that team than this team has the weight of expectations coming off of being in the Super Bowl and expecting to sort of have at least a repeat performance to get back to the Super Bowl. That 03 team was coming off a disappointing NFC Championship loss. We lost some of our key players early in that season. We lost Brian Dawkins. We lost Troy Vincent. We lost Bobby Taylor. So when you think about the players that had to sort of come together and get that team to be in 12-4, that was probably Coach Reed's best coaching job. So we were able to rally around low expectations and the outside naysayers not necessarily believing in us. That's the complete opposite of this team. This team has the weight of expectations on their shoulders based on what they did last year and what we expected them to do this year.
There have been teams I've been thinking of, over the last couple weeks where, were some teams that did well in the postseason that went far. And the one that I think of here in Philadelphia was the '08 Eagles team that, Donovan got benched in that year. They ended up going to the NFC Championship game, losing to Arizona. They blew that second half lead, and they don't go to the Super Bowl. But I was thinking even like a couple years before that, there was a Colts team they had to, basically struggled going in and into the playoffs, and then they ended up going and winning the Super Bowl. There have been a number of teams over the years that where that, but again, that's not easy. It's hard to be able to recover that. So you're hoping that the Eagles can find whatever that is, the issues that and only they know. As I said, only they know what it is that they need to be able to correct, that they need to be able to find. Hopefully, they can find that in the next few days. And by the way, we don't know Jalen Hurts' injury status. We don't know A.J. Brown's injury status. We don't know Devontae Smith's injury status for next week. I mean, big questions going into next week against the Bucs.
And to Fran's point, there's several teams that, when he talks about 05, 06, I think about Pittsburgh in 06.
Yeah, that's
I believe it was Green Bay in 2010. These are teams that had the talent there, but they didn't necessarily, for whatever reason, live up to that talent during the regular season. And they got hot as the playoffs hit, and they went on a run.
Both Giants Super Bowl teams.
Yeah, both Giants Super Bowl teams. So you look at the Eagles, that's sort of where you sort of have to hang your hat. Again, the talent is there on the roster. It's just a matter of playing up to that level and that potential that you have that matches the talent on the team. And they can stack their roster up against any team in the NFC, let alone the NFL. You got a top quarterback in the league that's young. You got one of the best duos of wide receivers in the league. You got 1,000+ yard running back in the league, one of the best offensive lines in the league. You got a defense, not necessarily where you want it to be, but there's enough young talent there. And again, sometimes when you get in the playoffs, the defense doesn't necessarily have to be lights out. It has to be good enough. You're ultimately going to win by how your offense carries you. And that's the strength of this team. So once you get those skill position guys on the offensive side of the ball rolling, it's going to give you a chance once you get in a one-and-done scenario with the playoffs is. We talk about Tampa next week. You talk about Jalen going up against a Baker Mayfield. No disrespect to Tampa. Great what Baker Mayfield's been able to do this year to get Tampa to win that division and get in the playoffs. But I think most people would take Jalen Hurts-led team versus a Baker Mayfield-led team. So that's what we should be able to hang our hats on moving forward, that there is still the ability to have this run in the postseason that we're looking for. But again, we just can't talk about it. You got to do it on the field.
And that would be the third week in a row where we look, maybe even fourth, where we look at our opponent and go, oh, on paper, we're a much better team. That's how we felt about against the Seahawks, against the Cardinals, against the Giants. And you're right. I think most people around the league would look on paper, roster for roster, yeah, I'd go with the Eagles over the Bucs. But the Bucs were also held out of the end zone today, too. They didn't score an offensive touchdown. They had to settle for field goals today. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup because these two teams met way back so early in their season when they were completely different versions of themselves. What can you draw from that first experience heading into this playoff?
For me, I would say the run game. Go back to week 3. DeAndre Swift. That was the last time he went over 100 yards. It was in that one. I think when you look at that run game, what they did on the road against Todd Bowles and that defense. We know that they like to blitz. Some of the issues the Eagles had in protection tonight, who's salivating with that is Todd Bowles. You know that he's sitting there saying, okay, we're going to dial up some of those same things that the Eagles have had trouble with here in this one. We're going to send something similar next week. So that run game could be a really nice antidote, and we'll see if that's something that can carry over into this matchup. There's plenty to talk about here with this game coming up. I don't know that we even need to talk too much about tonight. We can spin this forward to a week from now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would imagine the run game next week, and considering where our two wide receivers are at physically right now. We don't know the extended health of A.J. Brown and where he stands at after today's game. And hopefully Devontae next week can be as close to 100% as planned. But you look at our outside weapons, I just don't know how pertinent the passing game will be in that game next week. So when you look at that first matchup, DeAndre Swift, this offensive line going up against that Bucs defense that isn't necessarily the biggest. They like to rely on speed, athleticism on that side of the ball. Their linebackers, their safeties, what Todd Bowles likes to do. We were able to have success against them in that first game, running the football, 200-plus yards in that game, dominating time of possession in that game. I think about, was it 7 to 9 minutes late in that game where the Eagles ran the clock out
Last
on the
really
final
good
drive of the
drill.
game.
Yep.
Yeah, last final drive of that game. So those are things I look at. And this is a different Tampa Bay Bucs team. I think they are a more confident offensive unit than they were the third week of the season. Baker's done some nice things throughout the season with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rashad White in the backfield. But I look at the Eagles offensively. We'll have opportunities in the passing game, but this is a game that we may need to lean on that offensive line and DeAndre Swift.
And it was really telling, too, because, as you said, the Eagles were without 3 of their huge offensive weapons in this game. Their 1,000-yard running back and 2,000-yard receivers. And they had 1 reception over 20 yards today. Meanwhile, they gave up 3 receptions over 20 yards. One of them was 46 yards. Wan'Dale Robinson had a career game in the first half. He had the most yards ever he had this season in just the first half of play. These are the stats from today. You can see they were outgained. And, when you talk about a game as a whole, you have to win multiple battles within the game. Line of scrimmage, turnovers, possession. The Eagles didn't win any of that. Where to you was the one piece that kind of caused everything else to crack?
For me, it's our pass defense. We got to figure out something on that side of the football with our pass defense. We talk about whether or not it's the defensive line or the secondary, where they sort of go hand in hand with each other, right? So if the secondary is doing a great job of challenging receivers at the line of scrimmage, you make the quarterback hold the ball, that gives the defensive line an opportunity to get to the quarterback. Conversely, if the coverage is there, meaning the secondary is doing a good job of not giving them any open windows for the quarterback to throw the ball, then our defensive line has to get home. But our pass defense has been an issue all year long. And if I'm looking at next week, that's the one area that would concern me most. Looking at Mike Evans and Chris Godwin with that passing game, that would concern me the most as far as how do we figure out a way to defend big wide receivers and keep the big play off of us.
Their offensive identity is based off, Dave Canales is the offensive coordinator. He came from Seattle. He was with Pete Carroll for a long, long time. And he said that this was his introductory press conference back in January of last year that I'm going back on. He reflected on the time with Shane Waldron coming over from Sean McVay. And he said, that's what my offensive philosophy is now. So it is run game and basically take what the defense gives you. Baker Mayfield's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league so far this year on third down. So I go right to our third down defense and say, okay, what answers are they going to have against Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Rashad White? You go to the tight end, Cade Otton, Chris Godwin over the middle of the field. All of these different options, Baker Mayfield has shown that, I'm willing to get the ball and distribute and not force the issue, because that's been a problem for him over the course of his career is, in those big moments, he's going to throw a pick, he's going to take a sack, he's going to play hero ball. That has not been the case at all this year, and that's why they've been one of the best third down offenses. Rashad White, I think anyone that had him on fantasy football this year will say, I love Rashad White because he's catching a lot of balls because Baker Mayfield is not holding on to it and taking sacks. He's dumping the ball off and getting the ball to the backfield or to his guy out of the backfield so quickly, so efficiently. So to your point, I think that when you look at the pass rush in this game, that might be tough to do if the coverage is not sound on the back end. If everything's you have to force Baker Mayfield to hold on to the football to allow that defensive line to get home. And if the defensive line is not able to get home, then the tackling has got to be sound on the back end. Once again tonight, we saw missed tackles that led to big plays. They have got to shore some of this up, certainly going into this matchup.
And the Eagles defense did do that in the first matchup against Tampa Bay.
Yep.
They made Baker hold the ball just a little longer, make him think through his progressions a little bit, and they were able to get the coverage settled. So does that give you reason to believe that they can do it again, or are you more so concerned about recent performances rather than looking back weeks ago?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I definitely think there's something to be gained from going back and looking at your first matchup.
Definitely.
But Tampa is such a different team than they were in week 3 to where they are now. You have to be careful that you don't put so much emphasis on what they did early in the season. By the way, we don't have the same coordinator or play caller on that side of the ball as we had earlier in the season when Sean Desai was calling the defense versus Matt Patricia right now. But to your point, Marissa, I think there is some things you can gain from familiarity in the first matchup that you had. But it happened so early in the season that there's only so much you can take out of that versus where they are right now. And the same thing holds true for the Eagles, conversely. Like they are a different offense and defense from where they were week 3 in the season and where they are right now.
I will say one matchup I think we'll be talking about all week will be Slay making his return from the injury going up against Mike Evans, because Evans has been uncoverable for most of this season. He is still putting up outrageous numbers in like his 10th or 11th season in football. He's just been outstanding this year for Tampa Bay. And so that will be one of the big one-on-one matchups certainly to watch. The Eagles have been playing a little bit less man coverage in the last couple of weeks compared to how they started with Patricia calling plays, but I do think that will be a matchup we will likely see Slay over Mike Evans for a majority of the game, would be my guess.
Yeah, and I think an area, too, that the Eagles defensively need to keep an eye on, as you said, is the middle of the field and those yards after catch. We saw that early on against the Giants tonight, was that the middle of the field was wide open for them to kind of dink and dunk through and just continue to march down the field. Quick little progressions and getting themselves in manageable second down situations and just not able to get off the field.
Yeah, it's been an issue all year. I mean, just from the first game. I can remember us going back talking about that game versus the Patriots in the middle of our defense sort of being soft and vulnerable, and teams being able to take advantage of that. And happened again today. Tyrod Taylor being able to throw 300-plus yards a day. Could not have envisioned that. That's what happens when it's easy pitch and catch. And then not only that, a lot of yards after the catch. They got to be able to make tackles, come up and make plays. If you're going to force the team to throw the ball underneath because we don't want to give the deep throws up over our head, you got to be able to come up and make tackles.
Yeah, and I think the run game will be important as well. You don't want to be able to let Rachaad White get going on the ground. That has not been where the majority of his production has been, but you hope to keep it that way. Don't let them gain confidence with the run game and start to get things rolling downhill.
Right. We saw what happens when a team gets comfortable running the ball against the Eagles last week against the Cardinals. And if you at home don't really remember that game against Tampa Bay, here's a quick look back at week 3 and how the Eagles fared against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because statistically they did pretty well against the Bucs. You know, total yards 472 at 174. This was a game where the Eagles were really starting to roll. It seemed like they were getting their feet underneath them just 3 weeks in. Still, turnovers were a bit of an issue, but committed at the time of possession as well. We know stats don't always tell the full story, but is there something in particular that you remember about being dominant in that game?
174 yards of total offense for the Bucs. We'll take that next week for sure. And I think that would go a long way towards a potential Eagles victory. So if you could repeat that, keep Baker Mayfield contained. I remember going into that one, we were talking about what they were doing on third down and keeping drives alive and playing efficient, and the Eagles were able to shut the door on that. They had some really good coverage calls on third down. Some of it, I remember there were some like fluky plays in terms of like, oh, should that have been a flag or should it not have? But the Eagles were able to get stops. And that was the big thing, is you didn't allow these extensive drives. And it felt like, even tonight, when you look at early on in this game, there would be like a 26-yarder followed by an 18-yarder, and then they scored a touchdown. It was as soon as things got snowballed, then it was the drive was over, and they were able to get into the end zone. And then not only that, mid-drive that happened, but then it was like touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. The floodgates opened. So the Eagles will have to find ways to get stops early in the game next week, early in drives next week, to keep things from getting out of hand mid-drive and now allowing the Bucs to be able to score. You want to try and get some positive momentum. That will be so important just to get some confidence early in that game next week with how this season has ended from over the last few weeks.
Yeah, and I just remember the Eagles from an offensive standpoint imposing their will on that Bucs defense, basically wearing them down in the second half of that game, coming off the game they had against Minnesota where their offense was completely dominant, rushed for over 200 yards. Jalen threw the ball well in that game as well. But they came into that Bucs game with that same sort of formula. They let the running game sort of lead them. Jalen made some plays in the passing game off of play action passes or what have you. But eventually, once they got the lead, they leaned more on that running game, which until they leaned against that Bucs defense and wore that defense down in the second half of that game. I just remember some of the runs that DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell had in that game where they didn't get touched till they were like 5 or 6 yards beyond the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
Just some of the running plays that we ran in that game, they were just firing off the ball. And whether it was the Bucs' defensive scheme to where they were more concerned about, I guess, the passing game, and the Eagles, the fact that they stuck with the running game, it just allowed them to really dictate what they were going to do. And the Bucs defense were on their heels in that second half, which eventually led to that, I say, that 8-9 minute drive late in the fourth quarter after the Bucs had gained a little momentum. And it's like, okay, if they get a big stop here, then maybe they're back in the game. The Eagles never allowed Tampa Bay to have the ball again after that. It was like an 8-minute drive to end that game. And I remember that in that second half, that it was like, okay, this is the identity of our team. That's 2 straight games, pound the football at a lighter defensive front, set up our play action pass, and that's going to lead us to victory. That's what they did in that game.
And it was very calm, cool, collected, controlled from Jalen Hurts as well. And we hope to see that next week in the playoffs. And speaking of the playoffs, Dallas Goedert just spoke to the media in the locker room about his vision for the playoffs going forward.
He said kind of the same thing. It was a bummer. This isn't what we expected. This isn't how we wanted to come into this game. This isn't the outcome we wanted. But we got to flush it, and we got to get ready to go to work. And, it's 0-0 next week, and it's win or go home. And, I got the confidence in the guys here that, I don't think we'll be going home.
Is it possible to...
Getting back to their winning ways for sure. It's win and go home. That's how the wild card, that's how the playoffs go. They need to get back to what made them great, what made them a 10-1 team early in the season. Going back to that first game against Tampa Bay, we're talking about the offensive options. We don't know how great are A.J. Brown going to be, Devontae Smith, how healthy they'll be next week. But Olamide Zaccheaus had a great game against Tampa Bay. He had a big touchdown in week 3, and that was his first touchdown. And he also had a great play to get a first down that was kind of like a scramble, fall apart play.
Yeah.
So he showed up big. Maybe that's another matchup that the Eagles can kind of start. And he had a good game late in the fourth quarter today too.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Eagles and their chances next week, I think a lot of it starts with, you use the mantra of one game at a time, and that certainly is true. But I think with a team like the Eagles that have the aspirations and the ultimate goals of being in Vegas, it really, for me, it starts with them believing that they are still that caliber team. Because if you still believe you're that caliber of football team, then your mindset going into this game and in the postseason will be of that mindset. Meaning that we know we have to go down here and take care of business. We know that we're the better team. Let's put it all together to get ready for this long playoff run. But if they don't have that level of confidence in themselves, that that's what they can do, ultimately, you get concerned going into a game like this as to whether or not can we put together the game that we need to put together to win on the road in the playoffs. And that's where it starts at, is whether or not you believe you can go on the road and win a game in the playoffs. And so when you talk about Olamide Zaccheaus and really the offense in general, now we're saying, okay, what facets of this offense can step up and contribute, right? We know we got this guy a little banged up, that guy a little banged up. Can we use these other parts of the offense to also add to what we want to do? And that's what the Eagles need to do next week.
Before the show, I went back and just reread my notes from studying the tape against the Bucs back in week 3. And one of my big takeaways was the Eagles won the battle handily along the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. And I think that anytime a team is in a rut, whether it's us on the outside, and I know even on the inside as well, teams will just kind of, hey, you know what, let's rip it down to the studs. What is it? What is our bedrock? What is it that we are made of? What is it, the biggest strength of our football team? Let's lean into that this week. Let's go back to basics, all those different terms that are thrown around. And I think when you look at this team and the way that they are built, where the money is spent, exactly how it's the line of scrimmage. And exactly what you said earlier, like when you talk about that offensive game plan back in week 3, the offensive line, the run game, controlling it late in the game, in the fourth quarter, and salting the game away. You go over to the other side, the Bucs could not block the Eagles' defensive line in week 3. Yeah. Could not block them. Fletcher Cox got home for a sack. Jalen Carter was disruptive. Josh Sweat got home for big plays. That defensive line showed up in that game. That has not been the case for the last month and change for this team, right? So I think what you're going to need in this game next week, you want the line of scrimmage to be able to come up and show whatever they need to do to figure out, are there things schematically that we could do, matchups that we could take advantage of. What you want in that game, if you're going to get a duplicate result, is the line of scrimmage to be won on both sides of the football. I think that'll be a huge thing to watch in that game.
I just looked back at my old notes from the Tampa Bay game, and I have O-line synchronized, and then I have Jalen Carter is good at football.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what it all
He forced a
ended up
fumble in
with.
that game, right?
Yeah, him and Fletcher
fumble,
got there at the
yeah.
same time on Baker. Yes, exactly.
So we actually, usually we tell you at home about Ask Ike, presented by Pond Hockey, and I haven't had the opportunity to tell you about that, but somebody already jumped the gun and sent in a question.
People
so
know.
I'm very happy about this fan. They know the deal already. They want to know, Ike, how do we counter the blitz? It seems like we don't have an answer.
Wow, countering the blitz. It'd be interesting to see how much Todd Bowles blitz next week, right? He does have that in his background. He certainly likes to bring extra pressure. And I would say you counter the blitz by coming out with plays that'll get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quick. So, people hate to hear about bubble screens and things of that nature, but that's sort of what you need, right? You got hot reads. If they're built into your offense where the wide receiver and the quarterback are on the same page, again, that's just another form of getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands as quick as possible. You can have draw plays like screens and draws. Those are things that, as a defense, you're always concerned about when you're sending extra guys. Because the idea is to get as many guys going at the quarterback. And for an offense, you want to get those guys rushing up the field, and then you hit the ball behind those guys and try to slow them down. So whether you're thinking about screens, hot adjustment reads, or draws, those to me are the best ways to sort of counter a team who's trying to blitz a lot.
At the end of the day, you want Jalen Hurts to be able to hit the top of his drop and know where the ball's going.
Yeah.
Right. So whether that's a screen, whether that's a short underneath throw, whether that's a deep throw that's in rhythm.
A deep throw, yeah.
We've seen that over the last couple of years. We saw that in this game today. We saw it last week against Arizona. Remember that deep ball that just went through Devontae Smith's fingertips. You're going to have all these different answers, but you need to be able to go out and hit on some of those answers. And so the other element, too, is the quarterback run game, because that's a part of it. If it's 3rd and 6 and they're sending a zero blitz at you, the way to get it, because the zero blitz, okay, that's an all-out pressure where there's nobody else on the back end. It's one-on-one on the outside. Well, that's advantage defense in terms of numbers. You get those numbers back in your advantage when it's the quarterback holding on to the football, and now the running back is there as a blocker, and they're leading the way up into the hole for Jalen Hurts. So if you're able to hit on some of those
Kansas City.
Exactly right. You go to the Kansas City game winner. You go to the Buffalo game winner. You go to a lot of big plays. The Colts game last year that they won down the stretch. When they send a blitz, you have the quarterback run game. And you go back a week ago against Arizona. It was that 2nd and long play during that field goal drive, the second to last drive of the game. They had that quarterback run that was just dialed up, and A.J. Brown said it this week that that was very close to hitting. Right? I think that those are the kind of answers you want to be able to have when the team is ready to blitz, but you also have to be able to execute on those calls.
I have an Ask Ike. So if Nick Sirianni called you and said, Ike, I need you to come into the locker room and pump these guys up, what would you say? What is your inspiring message that you would bestow upon the locker room?
First of all, this is a family program. This is a family program. So I can't necessarily reenact what I would exactly
go to full
say.
character.
I can't go
Paraphrase, if you will. Yeah.
And how I would be in the locker room. But I honestly would based on just how I feel right now in the moment, right? I'm just being a former player and a fan of the team, and what I would want to say to the team, it's just more or less about understanding that all of our goals are right here in front of us, and that there's no reason to give up on those goals, and figuring out a way to dig deep down and soul search and understand that those goals still matter more than anything. And understanding, see, I'm more of a passionate plea type of guy, so I would give them more of a understanding that these opportunities don't come by every year.
Yep.
They don't come by very often. So being a good football team in this league with an opportunity to put a ring on it and win a championship doesn't come along for everyone. Some teams' goals are to be a winning team. Some teams' goals are just to get into the playoffs. And then there are teams that have goals to actually win a championship. And I know what that's like to have that as a goal and not to reach that goal. But I also know what it's like to almost give anything and everything to try to attain that goal. So making that passionate plea to my teammates would sort of be the message that I'm trying to get across to them, is to understand that these opportunities don't come along very often, and you don't want to look up one day or wake up one day and regret not necessarily taking advantage of this opportunity, right? It's one thing to not get it accomplished. It's another thing to not believe that you can get it accomplished and put forth your best effort. And that's the one thing that I can say about the teams that I played on. As disappointing as it was that we didn't ultimately win a championship, I was never a part of a team that didn't feel like we could win the championship or we didn't work to win that championship. We came up short, obviously, but it was never because we gave up on winning the championship.
One thing when you were talking that I thought of was, I'm trying to remember exactly where I saw it, if it was like in the Kelsey documentary on Amazon or if it was on Eagles Unscripted, but I remember Jason Kelsey being mic'd up during, I believe it was the NFC title game last year, and him going to Jordan Davis and saying,
yeah,
hey big guy, like you only get so many of these, and they don't come around every single year. Jason Kelsey played in one playoff game in his first, 7 seasons here in Philadelphia. It was in 2013, right? So he only played in one of those games for the first 7 years of his career. And so, I think there are a lot of people out there who'll be like, oh, like this team quit and this team's not. No, like there are guys in that locker room that say, like, I don't know how many more I have left. And, if you're looking at the young guys in the locker room, the second-year players, the third-year players, say, I know we were close last year, or if you're a rookie, you weren't here last year, you don't know how many more of these chances you've got. And so those are the kind of talks you have to have this week because, as you said, everything's out in front of you, but you've got to be able to go and take it. You've got to be able to handle your own business.
And to your point, Fran, it's so true, right? When where you're at in your career will dictate that message.
Yep.
You're a young player early in your career, and you could be the rob. You're trying to get everybody fired up and rally the troops as a young player, but you're in your second or third year. You got your whole career left ahead of you.
Yep.
But those older guys that knows that the end is closer than what the beginning was, it resonates more. And those guys seem to have more of an impact in the locker room, especially the guys that are respected. And that's where the Eagles are fortunate at, because they have 4 guys on this team whose voices are very well respected in that locker room. You think about Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson, and Jason Kelsey. When those guys speak, it seems to resonate with everyone in the locker room. Only problem is you wonder, have they had to be the ones who have led the message all year long? Because at some point, it falls on deaf ears, and that's what you don't want to happen. But it just, I know with those 4 guys, I know what I'm getting. I know what I'm getting with those 4 guys every week, and you're getting whatever they have to give you. You're going to get the best of it.
Yeah, I think when they speak, everyone listens, and we're actually going to take a listen now to head coach Nick Sirianni.
All right, fire away.
Nick, how severe is Jalen's injury? Is his status in question at all for next week?
He came back in and played. He's tough as heck. After he got hurt, he came back in and ripped it. And so, we'll see. I haven't even talked to the trainers yet or the medical staff. So we'll see.
How do you explain that first half after what happened last week and with something still on the line?
Yeah, obviously it wasn't good enough. We didn't coach well enough. We didn't play well enough. And, there's not really an explanation. We just didn't do the things we needed to do to be successful, and that starts with me.
Do you think the locker room is still with you?
Yeah, I know. I felt in that locker room that, we got a lot of belief in that locker room, and we know everybody. There's a lot of teams that would want to be in our position to make in the playoffs. We're in the playoffs, and we're moving on into to Tampa Bay, and everybody's got to give everything they got this week. Myself, the coach, starting with the coaches, putting a plan together, and then everybody in that locker room. We need all players, all coaches, all staff, all hands on deck, leaving everything they got in this locker room because everybody's 0-0 going into this week.
When things have gone, do you think players still should have faith in you?
Yeah, you can ask them that as far as, we're obviously, we've lost 5 of our last 6. That doesn't discredit the rest of the season. You can ask them that question.
What was your messaging? Is this a game where you say flush it, or is this a game you say?
Yeah, we'll look at it just like every game. there's not every game you use as a tool to help yourself get better. And so we'll look at this game. We'll make the corrections from this game. Obviously we're all going to be pissed off after this game, but yes, you have to flush it. Yes, you have to move on. You have to flush this last month. Like I said, a lot of teams want to be in our position. Everybody's 0-0 to start this thing off. And flush this game, but also learn from it, just like you do every opportunity you get on the field.
Sure, what are you seeing as some of the issues on defense?
Your early read on AJ.
Yeah, again, haven't talked to the trainers. I know AJ was the first one to greet everybody in the locker room when we walked in. Obviously, I feel terrible. Anytime any of our players get hurt, I feel terrible. That always, it's a tough thing to have to go through an injury and to play through injury. I'm hoping that he's okay, but we'll see as the week goes.
Nick, what are you seeing as some of the issues on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, obviously today was a little bit different as far as, gave up some passing yards today, I thought, and so we'll have to obviously watch that tape, but he got out of the pocket a couple times, made it, there was some guys open on some different things. And so the issues today were a little bit different than the issues last week. Obviously we got to get it corrected fast. And go out there and play a game. Like I said, we're going to move on. We're going to watch this game, get better from this game, and move on to Tampa Bay.
You pulled Jalen and you pulled Lane and Jason before the first half was over. Obviously, the game wasn't going your way, but you still had a full half to go. What went into that decision?
Yeah, when we went down 24-0, I thought, that it wasn't obviously going the way we wanted it to go, and wanted to get a chance to rest some guys. We, like I told you guys, we went out there to play and to try to get ourselves going, and also not knowing what was going to happen in the other game. So obviously I was doing a little bit of scoreboard watching, and I think that at that time the Dallas game was close, but our game was three-score game, and we hadn't moved it very, very well, and they were up 24-0, and that's why I made that decision at that point.
Do you think you gave Jalen enough answers versus the blitz, knowing that Wink was going to put you in?
Obviously we didn't do well enough there. So anytime it doesn't go well enough, then that's going to be on me. And so no, the answer to that is no. We didn't do a good enough job, and that starts with me.
Which is the problem, though, the scheme, or is it the game plan for why you didn't give enough answers versus
Sorry?
the game plan specific for this week, or is there a problem with the scheme overall that you're not giving Jalen
No,
enough answers?
this week that's what we, the things that we did this week obviously weren't good enough, and hats off to them. And, again, like I said, that starts with me.
That switch couldn't be
confidence level.
I'll get you a second.
Inside the locker room, with the season kind of going sideways here.
Yeah, I think I just, like I said to you guys earlier, the locker room, everyone looked at each other and said, "Hey, everything we got this week, and let's go. We're all 0-0. We're gonna get rid of this game. We're gonna get rid of this last month." And it wasn't too long ago that we beat Tampa up there. And let's go right now. And you don't got to win all games at once. You just got to play. You got to win each day, and that's what we're about to go do.
Which couldn't be flipped last week given the stakes, and this week given the discussion. What makes you think it can be flipped next week?
Because you believe in the guys in that locker room, you believe in the coaches, you believe in the players, and we got a lot of good players that I know will give everything they got. We got a lot of players that know what it takes to get to the top. We got a lot of guys in that locker room who know how to win playoff games. We got a lot of coaches who know how to win playoff games, and that's what makes you confident is that.
How does that belief stay there from your perspective? Because you've won a lot, you've been through the stretches. What do you see now, losing 5 of 6, that keeps that belief for you?
Yeah, none of us are quitters. We all get up off the mat when we're down, and we get up and we keep going. When you get hit in life, when you get hit in football, you got two options. You can stay down, or you can get the F up. And I know this group is fighters. I know this group will get up. I know that we've all been through things in our life that we've all had to deal with shit, and we know how to get up. And that's why we're all sitting in this room. The same message that I talked to the guys about last year, going into the NFC Championship game about, not only are we physically tough, we're mentally tough, and thinking about all the stuff that you've been through in your life, and why you're in this seat right now. There's the same message I would say right now, when you're going, not only when you're won 15 games like we did that last year at that time, but also when you're on a five game losing streak, because and so it's nobody's quitting on this team, because that's the reason all these guys are in that locker room, because they know how to freaking fight. The coaches know how to freaking fight. The players know how to freaking fight. The staff know how to freaking fight. And so we'll just get up and we'll fight again, and we'll see what happens next week when we put everything we got into it, and we've been putting everything we got into it, but we're going to put everything we got up into it this week, and we'll see what happens.
Last one.
Going into it without Devontae, how much did the game plan change offensively, and possibly without AJ potentially?
Yeah, I'm not thinking about. We're obviously going to move on to Tampa. I don't know what the status is on those guys yet. We'll think about that after I talk to the trainers. But things change obviously when two big playmakers are not on the field as far as the way you attack and the way you do different things. Listen, we didn't attack well enough as a coaching staff when AJ was on the field, and we got to make sure we figure out how to do that next week going into Tampa.
All right, thanks, folks.
That was Nick Sirianni there talking about that switch can be flipped because of the belief he has in these players. Where do you think the biggest belief lies in what they're capable of?
Well, it has to be on the offensive side of the football. I think that's the strength of the team, right? So you certainly have, from his point of view, you have faith in the entire team. But if you just come and asking me where I believe that lies, I believe it lies in the offensive side of the football. I think that's where your best players are at. On that side of the football, they have the most cohesiveness. They've been in the same system, so there's a lot more familiarity there. And when you're talking about having a direct impact on the outcome of the game, if the Eagles are going to have a chance to beat Tampa on the road, I don't think it's going to be because they go down there and win 10-7 or 13-6. No, it's going to be because their offense is able to go down there and click and get into the end zone and put points on the board.
And there's one moment in this season that I think perfectly encapsulates that, and that was maybe the high point of the season when the Eagles beat the Bills and we had Brandon Graham mic'd up, and Brandon Graham is talking trash before a play and says, "You don't know Jalen Hurts the way I know," and then he gets hit, and then he finishes, "You don't know Jalen Hurts the way I know Jalen Hurts." That's exactly what Ike is talking about, right? And there was the first thing Ike talked about earlier, Marisa, when you said, what is it that they can lean on going into next week? And he said, it's the belief. It's exactly what Nick Sirianni just said. It's that, and it's there. We've seen it. We've seen how it can affect this team. So I think that is what they need to be able to lean on, certainly here going into Tampa.
It definitely needs to be ignited, but let's check in now with Jalen Hurts at the podium.
Jalen, you guys got blitzed a lot the last time you faced the Giants. Obviously, knew it was going to come again. Do you feel like the game plan and the scheme give you enough answers?
I just don't think we executed it well enough. I think there are opportunities in both ends. We didn't execute it good enough. So obviously we have to be better from that and do a good job of that when it comes in the future.
Do you have a special hand, and is there any reason to think you won't be able to go next week?
We're taking it day by day at this point. Very unfortunate, crazy thing. Never experienced anything like that, but yeah.
What happened?
It popped out.
How did it feel when you went back in and throwing the football?
I mean, it was okay. I don't really know. I don't like to talk about the injuries. I just want to kind of see and let the time play out itself. In the end, I think as a team, we have everything in front of us. We have the opportunities we want in front of us, and about seizing that moment. Nothing else really matters. Nothing else really matters. Not anything of the past. Not any record. Not any past wins or losses. It's a solid 0-0 now, and the objective is a win.
Jalen, what's your confidence in Nick?
I have a lot of confidence in Coach. He puts his heart into it. He has a will to win, and that's really all you can ask for.
What's the sense that you're getting of the confidence level of your teammates inside the locker room?
Think about weathering it all, man. We get a question like that or a question like this. It's about not riding waves, never getting too high, never getting too low, and keeping the main thing with that. Right now, regardless of what's going on outside of us, anything external, it's about controlling what we can, and I truly believe this team is more than capable of taking advantage of what's in front of us. You got to do the work, and you got to do what you need to do. But all you need is a crumb. All you need is an opportunity. All I need is a crumb. And so, we're gonna put our hands on deck to do that. It's simply win or go home, and nothing else matters. Nothing prior matters. Anything, none of it. So.
What was it like playing without both AJ and Devontae? I mean, after AJ left, and what did you see on that play?
You say that again?
What was it like playing without both AJ and Devontae, and what did you see on the play where AJ got hurt?
I mean, unfortunate play right there. You don't want to see him go down like that, and wishing a speedy recovery for him. This is very unfortunate, especially in this moment. At the point we are, to see the guys kind of get banged up out there today. But we'll do what we need to do moving forward to get ready for our next opponent, and that is the mentality. Truly, it is that's the reality. The reality is you win or go home, and so everybody understands that, and we'll see what we're made of. We'll see what this team is made of with that, and I believe in it. I believe in us.
If you guys didn't flip that switch last week and this week, what makes you think it's going to happen next week?
There's always another opportunity. It's about taking advantage of the opportunity. Do I think we've done a good job of doing that? No, not as of late. But that takes complete ownership in every individual doing that. Now, it's about finding that deep in our souls and figuring out ways to win. I think I've talked about a standard for a long time, and the standard is to never be compromised, because that is something internal that drives you to be the best you can be and do what you're capable of, but who cares how you win in the playoffs? Just win or go home.
Jalen, how do you make sense of it? You started out 10-1, you guys have dropped 5-6. What's been missing during that skid? What do you have to get back?
Winning. I mean, just winning, finishing, situational football, managing these moments, executing in those moments, all of that. And the beautiful part about it is, you got an opportunity in front of us to take advantage of that, regardless if you fell down 5 times before. It's about how you get up for the 6th one. And so we got to respond as a team, and everybody understands that. And we can't waver from that. We can't waver from what's in front of us. It's about the work, and that's what it is,
We have time for 2 more. What was Nick's message to you guys in the locker room?
Pretty much what I'm saying now. And nothing else really matters. Right? Nothing else really matters. Go ahead.
You talked about during training camp about looking to find the identity of this team coming off of Super Bowl loss. Now that you're at the end of the regular season, what do you feel like the identity of this team is going into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think that's been something that we've searched for, and we've been searching for. Right? We haven't really had the consistency that we've desired as a team, and that's something that we've been kind of looking for. We see a glimpse of it, and we have that conversation all the time, and where there are moments where you see it, and then there are moments where it's like, oh man, something's not clicking. And so we gotta find a way to be consistent more often, and play at a high level more often. And that's what it takes to win championships. And in the end, it's about how you respond to it, and we gotta respond. This is what it is.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is what it is, and consistency will be key going forward, on both sides of the ball, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think everything that we expected to hear from Nick Sirianni, from Jalen Hurts tonight. After that game, I think we heard it was good to hear that Jalen Hurts could have gone back into the game, and he did go back in after the injury. We were reliving Ike's dislocated finger story during that press conference. So,
right, Ang?
yeah, we'll keep that one PG for the audience at home. But yeah, I think when you look at coming out of this game, I think both guys said exactly what we expected.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing there is obviously you want to know where he was at physically.
Exactly.
And so it seems like he's going to be okay for next week to go. So you certainly are in good fortunes with that. But then you want to know mentally where the team is at. It sounds like the messaging is coming from a good place. Seems like Nick Sirianni spoke to the team after the game, and they seemingly are on the same page. Jalen echoed a lot of the things that Coach Sirianni talked about there. It really is important how they handle not so much this loss, but just the end of the season in general, like in totality. Not just this game, because again, even had they won this game, I don't think it certainly wouldn't have changed the outcome as far as where they would be seeding wise, but how they played coming out the locker room the first half of the game, where they're at physically, where they're at mentally, believing in whether or not they still have an opportunity to accomplish all of their goals. You know, you sit there and you listen to Jalen, and you can take a little solace in the fact that he seems to always be even keeled. And that's sort of a blessing that occurs, because you don't know, okay, you want him to be a little more emotional, but at the same time, you're saying to yourself, he has a steady hand. And he understands what's in front of them and what they need to do. So he needs to be the guy with the calming voice and the steady hand that's speaking to the team, not necessarily speaking from a state of panic or disparity or anything of that nature. You normally leave that up to the defensive players. Those are the guys that are the emotional ones. I think Jalen needs to have this sort of calming presence, but also being cerebral and knowing how important it is and realizing that forget about what the regular season has been like, so to speak, from the standpoint of you don't let that linger into the postseason. Now you get a clean slate, a fresh start. And again, I mentioned this earlier, the talent level is there. Now it's about playing to that level of talent that you have on the team. And that's where you want Jalen, as your leader of your team, to be able to instill that and have that message coming from him that, hey, I still believe we can do all the things we set out to do at the beginning of the season. Will it be a different road? Sure. But it doesn't mean that we can't get the things accomplished that we wanted to get accomplished.
Yeah, if you were ever questioning Jalen Hurts' ability to be even-keeled, when his finger was basically zigging and zagging everywhere, I don't think he showed an ounce of emotion on his face. So he really is kind of that steady person kind of steering the ship there. And you can't change the results, but you can change the energy around the team. And Kevin Byard talked about how things can be turned around for the Eagles.
I mean, just stay optimistic, stick together, don't start pointing fingers. Like I said, at the end of the day, it's not a good feeling right now, but the reality is everything is still in front of us. So we have to continue to treat it like that. Just try to prepare harder, do more, watch more film, recover harder, do whatever we need to do to try to go get a win this on whatever day they play us.
Kenneth Gainwell led the Eagles with 62 rushing yards today, and his longest run of the day is the subject of this week's Ricoh Review.
All right, so for this week here on the Ricoh Review, we're going to go back to the longest offensive play from the first half, and that's this 33-yard run from Kenny Gainwell. It happened in the first quarter, and it's a play that honestly in this segment we've broken down 4 or 5 times. It's one of the Eagles' staples here. It's a basic inside zone RPO, but with a fold block from center Jason Kelce. And again, this was the longest play on offense from the first half. What you're going to get is really just 3 blocks on the play side here. You get the kick-out block from Lane Johnson on the defensive end. You get the pin-down block from Cam Jurgens here, the right guard and nose tackle. And then you've got the folding block from Jason Kelce up to the play side linebacker, and that is going to serve as the lead block for Kenny Gainwell on this play. Now, the Giants are going to be blitzing here, and so all of these gaps, they are going to get filled really quickly. And as long as Kenny is able to run away from this backside linebacker, this backside blitzer, he's going to be home free because you're going to get Kelsey one-on-one here with the linebacker, and it's going to happen very close to the line of scrimmage. So as long as Kenny can clear the line, he's going to be in good shape here. Remember, it's an RPO, so you've got pass options for Jalen Hurts here on the backside, but we can let this run and see how the blocks develop. Again, you get the kick out from Lane. You've got Kelsey getting up to the second level. He takes on the backer. And again, with those linebackers all blitzing downhill, you don't see any blue jerseys up here, and that's why this run goes from in the backfield, Kenny Gainwell, to 30 yards downhill. Really well executed. We can let this run. You see Gainwell get downhill. He did a great job. He actually had a couple of explosive runs in the first half on this exact play concept. Really well executed by the Eagles offense.
Now's your chance to vote for the Toyota Player of the Week. Go to PhiladelphiaEagles.com/Toyota Player of the Week to cast your vote and get a chance at a brand new Toyota. So here are your options. First of three coming up, and it's running back Kenneth Gainwell. Fran just broke down this great play, 62 yards. His longest carry was for 32. Next, we have Marlon Tuipulotu, 3 total sacks, one sack, 3 tackles. And then Quez Watkins, 8 receptions for 93 yards and a touchdown at the end of the game. Fellas, control yourselves. Who gets your vote?
You got this, Ike.
Somebody has to.
You know what? I'm going to go with Kenny G. I like Kenny Gainwell in this game.
Kenny ran it hard. That
he ran
32-yarder
hard,
was a good run. He had a couple other nice ones in this game. I'm going to go Kenny Gainwell as well.
All right, Kenny Gainwell all around. Speaking of the playoffs, we talked about it earlier in the show. The Eagles will be facing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the second time this season. They faced them back week 3. Now, Tampa Bay is 9-8. They're first in the NFC South, and they will host the Eagles. They clinched that victory over the Panthers earlier today, but they were held out of the end zone. They won that game just with field goals. So what needs to be at the top of the priority list as we look forward?
Let's use the same game plan the Panthers used today.
Keep them out of the end zone?
Yes, that was obviously a big game for Tampa Bay in all seriousness. But for Carolina, who seemingly had nothing to play for today, and to hold Tampa Bay to just 3 field goals, I saw a large portion of that game today, and Tampa Bay's offense couldn't get anything going. You know, Baker's a little banged up right now. He's dealing with some upper body situation, rib issues or what have you, so their passing game certainly isn't there. I think Rachaad White is a very good running back out of the backfield. If you get him going, he can do some dangerous things. But if Baker can't throw the ball and they can't be as effective in the passing game, it's going to be tough sledding for Tampa Bay. I like what Carolina did today. The Eagles can employ a lot of the things that the Panthers did against this Bucs offense, especially with a banged-up Baker Mayfield.
Win the line of scrimmage on both sides. We talked about it earlier. I think if the Eagles are able to dominate up front on offense, get the run game going, you've got all 3 of your pass targets are banged up in some way, shape, or form. We'll see how those guys look a week from now, but you want to be able to get that run game going and then defensively get after Mayfield. If he's not 100% still by the time the Eagles play this game, get after Mayfield, make him feel you, and at the end of the game, I think the Eagles come out with a W.
Yeah, maybe the Eagles can tap into some of that week 3 energy, get a similar result, and move on and throughout the playoffs. So that's going to do it for us here on the Eagles postgame show presented by Ricoh. And just like that, the 2023 regular season is in the books. From now on, it's win or go home for the Philadelphia Eagles. For Fran and Ike, I'm Marissa. Have a great night and a great week, and we'll see you in the postseason.